It began not with Spain, but with a Portuguese exile. Ferdinand Magellan, was born in northern Portugal, the son of minor nobility. As a teenager, he entered royal service and sailed east with Portugal's empire, fighting in India and Malacca, chasing spices and glory. But after decades of service, he quarreled with King Manuel I. Passed over for command, Magellan left his homeland behind. He carried one bold idea across the border into Spain, to reach the Spice Islands not by rounding Africa, the Portuguese route, but by sailing west. If he was right, Spain could break Portugal's monopoly on cloves and nutmeg, and perhaps Magellan could make himself immortal. In 1519, King Charles I of Spain, a teenager, barely 19, but already ruler of Castile and Aragon, agreed to Magellan's proposal. The Treaty of Tordesillas had divided the world between Spain and Portugal, but the exact longitude of the Moluccas remained uncertain. If Magellan could reach them by sailing west, they might fall into Spain's sphere. Charles backed him with 5 ships: Trinidad, Magellan's flagship; San Antonio, the largest ship, captained by Juan de Cartagena, a Castilian bureaucrat the crown placed to keep an eye on Magellan; Concepcion, commanded by Gaspar de Quesada, another Spanish noble; Victoria, under Luis de Mendoza, a wealthy knight; Santiago, a small caravel, light and fast for scouting. Nearly 270 men sailed: Spaniards, Portuguese, Italians, Flemish, and even a few Greeks. Among them was Antonio Pigafetta, a Venetian nobleman and volunteer. He had no rank, but he carried a pen, and his journal would become the voyage's most vivid account. On September 20th, 1519, they left Sanlúcar de Barrameda. 5 ships, hundreds of men, and a leader they barely trusted. By December, the fleet reached the coast of South America. They followed it south past Rio de Janeiro and into colder seas. Their hope was to find a hidden strait cutting through the continent to the Pacific. But as the months dragged on, food rotted, tempers soured, and suspicion grew. The Spaniards resented Magellan's Portuguese origins, whispering that he was more loyal to Lisbon than Madrid. Cartagena, Quesada, and Mendoza, proud Castilian captains, believed they, not Magellan, should command. In March 1520, at Puerto San Julian, in the frozen reaches of Patagonia, patience snapped. During Easter, the Spanish captains rose in open mutiny. Mendoza seized his ship, Cartagena rallied sailors to his cause, and Quesada drew steel against his commander. But Magellan moved swiftly. Loyalists boarded Mendoza's vessel by surprise. Mendoza was stabbed and killed. Quesada was captured, tried, and executed. Cartagena, once the king's inspector, was marooned on the empty Patagonian shore. No one ever saw him again. Pigafetta recorded the aftermath bluntly. The captain general had justice done upon them. Thus were the mutineers chastised and tranquility returned. Not long after, disaster struck again. The small Santiago, scouting ahead, wrecked on the coast. The survivors staggered back overland with news of the loss. 4 ships remained. Through the winter and into spring, the fleet crawled south. Then in October 1520, they sighted a long inlet twisting into the land. For weeks, they probed its channels. Cold waters hemmed in by black cliffs and snow-streaked mountains. The crew realized what it was: a passage through the continent, the long-sought strait. But fear still haunted them. The San Antonio, captained by Álvaro de Mesquita, who some say was Magellan's cousin, deserted in secret. Its officers mutinied, seized Mesquita, and turned back for Spain, abandoning the fleet. Magellan pressed on with the remaining 3 ships. On November 28th, they emerged from the far side into a new ocean. To their astonishment, its waters were calm after the storms of the strait. Magellan christened it the Mar Pacifico, the Pacific. Pigafetta remembered, "We issued forth from that strait, engulfed with joy, and entered a sea which we named Pacific." The Pacific was vast, far larger than anyone in Europe realized. For 98 days, they crossed it without sight of land. Provisions ran out. The men gnawed leather softened by seawater and fire. They chewed sawdust and scraps. Scurvy spread. Gums bled. Teeth loosened. Bodies wasted away. Pigafetta's diary tells the horror. We ate biscuit, but it was no longer biscuit, but a powder full of worms, stinking of rat urine. We drank yellow water that had been putrid for many days. We ate pieces of ox hides, and yet many died of hunger and sickness. When land finally appeared, it was not salvation. On March 6, 1521, they anchored at Guam in the Marianas. At first contact, Chamorro Islanders approached in outrigger canoes, trading food and water. But when one boat was stolen, Magellan struck back. His men raided the village, killed several islanders, and burned their homes. He left calling the place the Islands of Thieves. 3 weeks later, they landed in the Philippines. At Cebu, Magellan forged an alliance with Raja Humabon, a local ruler. He baptized Humabon, his queen, and hundreds of subjects into Christianity, declaring Spain's first foothold in Asia. But power tempted Magellan to overreach. Another chief, Lapu-Lapu of Mactan, refused to bow to Spanish authority. Magellan vowed to teach him a lesson. On April 27, 1521, at dawn, Magellan led about 60 men against more than 1,000 island warriors. Cebuano allies refused to fight. Magellan's armor slowed him as he waded into the shallows. Pigafetta, who watched from the ships, left the most famous account. When our captain saw this, he ordered us to retire slowly, but the men took no heed. The natives shot arrows, lances, and stones at him. Twice he was struck in the arm with a bamboo spear, and at last they pierced his leg. Then they hurled upon him so many lances that he fell face downward, and they continued to strike him until they killed him. The man who dreamed of circling the world died knee-deep in the surf. The fleet fractured. The Conception was too damaged to continue and was burned. The Trinidad, attempting to return east across the Pacific, was captured by the Portuguese. Only the Victoria, now under the command of Juan Sebastian Elcano, pressed west. Elcano was a Basque mariner, hardened but practical, who had once been accused of mutiny himself. Now with the mission collapsing, he resolved to finish it. The Victoria sailed across the Indian Ocean, battered by storms, chased by Portuguese patrols, bleeding men at every turn. By the time she rounded the Cape of Good Hope, the crew was skeletal. At the Cape Verde Islands, Portuguese forces captured 13 of them, but Elcano refused to stop. On September 6, 1522, the Victoria crept back into Sanlúcar de Barrameda. 3 years after she left, she carried only 18 Europeans alive. From 270 men, only a handful had lived to see Spain again. Pigafetta, one of the survivors, wrote with pride, "We were the first to circumnavigate the world, going from east to west. The voyage had stripped them bare. What began with fanfare and banners ended with a ghostly procession. Skeletal men, skin like parchment, staggering into the harbor with eyes hollowed by hunger and grief. They had crossed an ocean no European had dared, and in the process, watched their world unravel. Dreams of glory dissolved into storms, mutiny, and death. Yet still, they returned. It was not triumph they carried home, but proof. Proof that the world was wider, harsher, and stranger than anyone had imagined. For the men who lived it, the voyage was a nightmare. But for history, it was a beginning.